when you talk about the human capital formation, you need to understand that they are the drivers of growth. In 10 years, the human capital output level increases by 10. The human capital and the economic growth will also try to see about some of the research factors. So now if you look at the developed country, there is definitely a significant Good morning and welcome to the third session on human capital formation. We have been talking about a very interesting topic, trying to understand about what are the factors that lead to the true development of the economy. So in this session, we are going to see the following topics, and they are the human capital and economic growth, and we're going to talk about the indicators of growth. Both of them are very important. Why? Because when you talk about the human capital formation, you need to understand that they are the drivers of growth and they will take it forward in terms of building a stronger economy. And there are many indicators apart from the human capital itself that start supporting the economy to move to the next level. So there have been quite an amount of research and empirical evidence that has gone in both these sectors, both the places, in order to make the economy a stronger one. So let's have a quick look into it. Now, starting with the first factor, the human capital and economic growth. Now, this factor of productivity of human beings or human capital contributes substantially not only towards increasing labor productivity but also stimulates innovation and creates ability to absorb new technologies. So we are going to see quite a new words that are going to actually help in the development of economics. The first one that we are going to learn today is on the concept of productivity and then towards the innovation and technology. Human capital is such a fantastic factor that actually leads to the output of the nation, because better the human capital in terms of productivity, automatically the manufacturing sector is able to pull up, and because of which the core economy again starts moving forward. Now, in this, you need to understand with a simple example. Now, for example, in India, there is an engineering college which is producing about 100 graduates per year. Now, all the 100 graduates might not be interested in taking up the same kind of job. But assuming for a while that we are producing about 100 mechanical engineers every year, all the 100 mechanical engineers, because of the knowledge what they have acquired, will be absorbed in one company who will in turn start producing, who will in turn start getting into the output level right from the day one. So every year when we keep on adding 100 more, what happens is that in 10 years, the human capital output level increases by 10. So 100 per year into 10 years. So you would see that within 10 years, the productivity level of this 1,000 engineers will definitely increase the output level of the nation. Now, the other factor that you also need to understand is that this 1,000 engineers will not be reacting at the same levels. They will be thinking at different angles. They will be trying to innovate something new. They want to do something better than what they were doing in the previous years. So what will happen here is that the same human capital will install innovation into the organization. They will start thinking about new ideas. They will come up with better research and development, which will in turn actually help to absorb the new technologies. So for example, today in the office space, let's try to understand when we are talking about concepts like work from home or digital workforce altogether. These are all concepts that were integrated, innovated by the people who started thinking about better levels of production. So today when we talk about the digital age, when we talk about the electronic age altogether, these are all new technologies which were innovated by the same human capital in order to increase the productivity. So every time when the human capital factor starts going up in a positive side, automatically you will also see that the output is increasing, the innovative side is also growing, which helps us to come up with better technology to make the nation even more stronger. The second factor that we need to understand is education provides knowledge to understand changes in the society, a very, very important factor through which scientific advancements can also be facilitated, and the ability to make the scientific absorbment will start going more towards bringing up new technology. Now let's try to understand this point also. Education and knowledge are two interlinked factors altogether. When you study in a college or when you study in an institution of higher order, the ideology is that you don't just get a degree and walk out. The ideology is more to make you intellectual, a person who is capable of producing better output, a person who can come up with better talents, abilities and skill set, so that tomorrow the organization that absorbs you will be able to get the best output out of you. So what we try to do in education sector is that we try to give the students the better skill set, a better platform through which you can perform. So the concept of education is to drive knowledge about different factors, different sectors altogether, so that the students who absorb that knowledge tomorrow go back to the industry, display their skill sets, and they are able to do better. So our ideology of transforming a theoretical knowledge to a practical knowledge actually helps in terms of driving the nation forward. I want you to think about this concept sometime. Why? Because initially you might feel that this is becoming too theoretical, or this might become too much above the head kind of thing, but definitely not. In human capital, all you need to understand is just the transformation factor of how education is transforming the nation and how knowledge is actually helping us to come up with better technology, better systems, so that our country can go ahead and increase the productivity altogether. Now, moving forward, the human capital and the economic growth will also try to see about some of the research factors that they have come up. Now, the empirical evidence, when I use the word empirical evidence, that means to say that there is some qualitative and quantitative research that has been done in the area of human capital, which suggests that human capital causes economic growth is rather nebulous, which means to say that it's quite true. For example, this may be because of the measurement problems. There are certain factors which we are not still able to come forward and predict it altogether. Now, for example, education is measured in terms of school, in terms of the teacher-student ratio and other factors that actually do not reflect the quality of the education. Health services measured in monetary values and life expectancy and mortality rates. Now, what are we trying to understand here is that there are certain research which try to point out the factor that education in India still lies to be on a theoretical, on a very, very nascent stage altogether. The reason being is that we are still concerned with the basic metrics rather than the advanced or the innovative metrics. Now, for example, as a student, you might have come across the schooling for the last 10 or 12 years. Now, all the last 10 or 12 years, what you have done here is that you have just kept on passing from grade 1 to the next grade altogether. So the concept of schooling in India is all about passing through the different grades and coming to a particular level where you become eligible to take up higher education. Now, the concept of this is being really questioned. Why? Because in all the 12 years or 10 years of your schooling, that is your primary schooling, your secondary schooling, and then when you move to your higher secondary schooling, the question that is being asked here is that what is the qualitative output or knowledge that you were able to gain altogether? But the answer to that cannot be done in one sentence or in one line altogether, because many a times we feel that education is still at a very primitive stage, trying to feed the students only on textbooks, only on the syllabus standpoint. This is what is the challenge in India, where we are not able to truly create an intellectual output and intellectual personality altogether, because most of the knowledge is only subject driven. We are not able to drive the person towards the education, the innovation platform altogether. So that is where I always feel, I always think that at some point of time we need to build, we need to come up with this kind of understanding, we need to come up with this kind of thought process altogether. So that is very, very important. That is highly recommended altogether. Now, another factor is that the healthcare, similarly, or any other factor for that matter of while, is also trying to make you understand, is also trying to make you drive on the factor that healthcare is not just like an expenditure. Why? Because in India, let me tell you, moment a person falls sick, the question in the mind is the cost to bring him back to normalcy, because there is a cost involved in going to the doctor, hospitalization cost, post-hospitalization cost, medicine, so many factors. So what is looked after in India as a healthcare initiative is only a monetary expenditure. But what we really need to look in terms of growth, in terms of stability, is that we need to start understanding whether the healthcare is being covered on qualitative terms. What are the preventive measures that we have been able to drive in the mind of people? Have we been able to convince the people why you need to go for a healthcare insurance? So all these kind of questions are still lingering in the minds of the people, which needs to be answered in the most convincing manner. So somewhere down the lane, I start feeling, I start observing on this thought that we need to build this system in a more systematic manner. We need to go ahead with more structural reforms altogether. So that is where this will become more reflective, more thought process, thoughtful oriented altogether. So this is where I would feel that just the mortality rate or the death rate or the birth rate, these kind of statistics number will not be just able to prove the real need of human capital formation, because these numbers are only a reflective measure stating that what has happened in your country over a period of time. But using the statistics, what is that we have been able to derive? What is that we have been able to conclude? How is that we are able to form a better structure, a better strata altogether matters a lot for us. So that is why I would say that when you talk about the human capital and economic growth, somewhere down the lane, we need to structure ourselves. We need to grow ourselves as a country, as a system that is able to provide a qualitative life to every single citizen. Then automatically what will happen is that that quality will improve and we will be able to see a better output, a better development towards the nation. Now, moving forward, the human capital and economic growth, again, if you start seeing as the factors that were mentioned before in the previous slides, we also come up with an analysis of improvement in education and healthcare sector and the growth in the real capita. Now, how are we going to measure the per capita income altogether? Now, if you start understanding the concept of per capita income in India, it is more about just measuring the income. What is the income that is being earned by a person? So now if you look at the developed country, there is definitely a significant amount of increase in the per capita income. That is because they have really analyzed and invested on education and healthcare. What they have tried to understand here is that rather than making a person just degree oriented, just making him earn some degree, they have invested time in making the person a skill-based resource. So now what happens here is that when you go through the concept of human capital formation in India, we have been successful year on year churning out lot of degree students or probably graduates altogether. Now roughly if you see in India, about 7 to 8 lakh people graduate in different disciplines or different ideologies altogether every year. But is that true that all that 8 or 10 lakh people who are graduating in India every year are able to get a successful job? Are they able to satisfy their dreams? The answer is no. The reason is that most of the people just take education as a factor of growth. They just feel that it is a mandatory factor, it is a prescribed factor of the society. So they just go forward and they just get themselves graduated in a particular line. It might be commerce or science or arts. And then when they come out, they're not able to realize on the growth factor that where is the opportunity for me. Similarly, the healthcare sector also, if you start seeing that, people believe that insurance is just a mandatory clause which we need to invest. They look at insurance as an investment purpose, as a tax relief purpose, but they don't think that insurance is actually the most valid thing to protect yourself and your family. So now what happens is that since there is not a qualitative approach that we have done in the area of education and healthcare, the per capita income is still not realized to the level of developed countries. In the other countries, they have made this a mandatory factor where people understand the systematic importance of investing your time, money and energy in education and healthcare, which makes the country even more matured, even more growth oriented, and automatically the demand for labor goes up, the demand for the quality work goes up. In turn, the income also starts going up, which leads to the per capita real income. So that's where you see that all these factors contribute to the development of the income of individual as well as of the nation. The second factor, in other words, human capital growth of developing countries has been faster, no doubt about it, but the growth per capita is definitely slower than the other companies because it needs to be moving in a pace where you need to start thinking from the structural reforms itself. So I would always like to say here on this factor that these are the things which are going in pace, in tandem at a particular level, but this needs to improve over a period of time. The next thing, there are reasons to believe that the causality between human capital and economic growth flows in either direction. Now, why it flows in either direction? Because if you start seeing that the human capital and economic growth, they are not in tandem, they don't move in the same position, they are moving exactly in the opposite position. The reasons are many, because if you start understanding the reasons behind this growth, they are happening because most of the time people find it or people feel that they are not exactly the same way. One side there is an economic development happening, the other side people feel that we are not getting benefited with it. So human capital and economic growth sometimes are becoming a parallel story for most of the nation. Now, the other thing that if you start seeing that higher income causes building of high level of human capital and lower income leads to a lower level of human capital. This is quite true. Why? Because if you start seeing here on this factor, countries of the advanced economies, which are highly developed nations, they all have people who have higher standards of living, right from the environment, the house which they live, the car in which they travel, the kind of insurance package, the kind of education, the kind of system they are covered, all are of higher standards when compared to developing nations. So automatically what happens is that when you are a part of a developed nation, when you are a part of a great economy, automatically even the coverages, even the packages, even the system that is governing with you moves up. When you go to a country which a lower income, automatically the standard of living is also low. So you will not be able to get the same benefits, you will not be able to get the same amenities or facilities that an advanced nation will give. So lower the income, lower the standard of living altogether. Now, moving forward, the other factor that India has recognized is the importance of human capital in economic growth long ago. Yes, we did do a lot of exercise to understand this. Right from the post-independence era, let's say from 1955 onwards, we have been trying to make everybody understand the importance of economic growth with human capital. Somewhere down the line, we have always felt that the Indians need to be given more more opportunity. The country needs to be provided with better agenda, better system altogether, so that everybody can get benefited. So we have been trying to come up with policies and schemes that have been helpful for the growth of the nation. The 7th 5-year plan says that human resources development, you can read it as human capital, has necessarily been assigned a key role in development strategy, particularly in a country with large population. Let's try to understand the sentence first. Now, in a 7th 5-year plan, what we tried to actually make it a point here is that we wanted human capital to be the center of the developmental strategy. When a country or when a nation tries to make a developmental increment or a growth altogether, the question that always comes back, that always comes to the hindsight belief is that how can you develop a nation without people? So we have understood and we have been trying to keep on investing on people as the core center of strategy. We always believe that as long as we have a large population, a population which is talented, which is intellectual in nature, that population need to be given the primary focus. They need to be the pivotal center of growth altogether. So we believe on this factor that with the human beings, the simple philosophy of for the people, of the people, and by the people has always been the key mantra for success. That has been the key source for which we have been developing our nation altogether. Even now, in the year 2020, we have always taken into factor the reason for better education and better growth. Now, if you see the new education policy that has been prescribed in this year, we have also tried to give an importance of flexibility in learning in terms of skills, learning in terms of co-curricular activities. The reason is that, as we have already learnt in this chapter, it is education that is going to transform the population. It is education that is going to make you better. So at any given point of time, we are not going to give away on human capital. We are not going to take it as a second line strategy. We are going to keep the human beings as a center of growth, and we are going to make a great progress altogether. Now, moving forward. Now, we also have understood the importance of training and education in terms, why? Because they, in a long run, become the asset of the nation. So more the training, more the education, the better skill altogether, this would become an asset in accelerating the economic growth. Now, for example, when India wanted to become a manufacturing hub, trying to beat China in terms of growth, in terms of development, the first thing that came to the mind of Government of India is that, why don't we start a skill foundation through which we can train those youngsters, make them more capable, make them more skillfully employed, so that in the long run, we can also become the manufacturing hub of the world. This statement is in relation to that same thing that we have brought up, called as the National Skill Foundation of India, where we are trying to train hundreds and thousands of youth who can become the potential asset of our nation. No sooner we are also going to become, in the recent years, we are going to become the South Asian hub for manufacturing, and that is again going to happen because we are concentrating on training and education. We are coming up with different kinds of regional centers of growth where we want India to be focused as the most advanced nation in terms of development, in terms of growth altogether. And it is also understandable here that it is difficult to establish a relation of cause and effect from the growth of human capital. That is, we cannot just make a rapid remark saying that with education and healthcare alone, human capital can grow, or human capital is directly dependent on only these two factors. There are several other factors, there are several other indicators of growth that we will be seeing in this chapter, because we cannot just take these two factors and directly point it out and say that this is the end of the system. So as you start observing, as you start understanding the human capital formation over a period of time, you will start understanding that the several other indicators will also make a composite index for growth and development of the country. Now, moving forward. Now, coming to the indicators of growth altogether, two independent reports of the Indian economy in recent times have identified India that they would grow faster due to the strength in human capital. Now, this report was actually given by the Deutsche Bank, a German investment and a growth bank. In its report said that the global growth that was published in the year 2005, which stated that India would be among the top 4 growing countries in the world by 2020. Not to forget and not to just move away what prediction the Deutsche Bank had done in the year 2005. In 2020, we are witnessing it. We are seeing the growth as the topmost country in the world. The reason is that Deutsche Bank had given in its report very clearly stating that for a country having about more than 100 crore population, we are rightly having about 138 crore population, definitely success can be spelt only through people, only through the human capital formation. And India had all the things at the right place. We had people, we had process, and we had the system, we had the knowledge with us. So definitely at any given point of time, there was no reasons where we could touch failure. We had all reasons to become the most successful nation in the world, and the first indicator of growth in India was definitely people. So using people as a strategy, using people as a growth cycle altogether, we propelled ourselves and we moved forward. So that is the reason the indicator of growth using this factor has really made a difference for us altogether. Now, moving forward, we are also going to understand about the factor called our empirical processes that investigation supports that human capital is the most important factor of production in today's economy that helps to increase your GDP altogether. There was a time when India and China together were being diminished by other nations, saying that we were the reason for population explosion in the world. But later, these countries realized that the real essence of GDP, the growth behind the GDP, is possible only when you are investing in human capital. And that was the reason today, if you start seeing that the GDP of India started growing much more faster compared to the other nations. And one of the main reasons that you will again start seeing is that we are the country today having large number of private universities, and we have invested a lot of money, time in terms of educating people. So we are one of the countries which has got the largest number of private universities and educational institutions which are providing education at different fronts at different level. Because of this, we are able to produce qualitative labor who are helping us to grow the GDP to the next level as far as possible. So that is why it is very, very important for all of us to understand the growth of GDP. Now, with reference to India, it also states that between 2005 and 2020, that is the current year, a 40% rise in average years of education to just about 7 years. Now, this is what I see here, 40% rise in the education sector. I would say it is not just 40%, but it's more than 65% that we have been able to see in terms of growth in education. There was a time in India where we were struggling to become digital, but today India is the digital hub of the world when it comes to education. We have some of the best digital educators, we have some of the best universities in the world, and we have some of the best in terms of research and development altogether. So in 15 years, we have made a rapid stride in terms of growth, in terms of development, which clearly shows that the indication of growth is India because of the human capital formation that we have been able to give. Probably by next 5 or 6 years, India would become the world #1 in terms of education, world #1 in terms of research and development, and definitely prove that our country would be the best in the world in terms of the human capital formation. Now, moving forward. World Bank, which is the leading financial institution in the world, also said in the recent report, India and the knowledge economy, leveraging on strengths and opportunities. This was one of the most important research paper and a journal that was published, states that India should make transition to the knowledge economy, and if it uses the knowledge as much as Ireland, a comparison that was given, which could make it even more powerful, and the GDP, that is, if you start looking, the per capita income would jump from $1,000 to $3,000 in 2020. And the answer is quite obvious and quite true altogether, because World Bank made this observation on India, and they were able to say that if India could transition itself into a knowledge-based economy, to a system where education is actually put into practical application, a situation where education can be used for the betterment of the society, automatically India could become the leading example in the world. They had compared India to Ireland, a smaller country which had transformed itself into a knowledge-based economy few years back. So similarly, India, with a large population, with lot of intellectual capacity, training and ability, can definitely be transformed to a country of much higher order of economic importance. So that is why World Bank was trying to make a comparison, and World Bank had also said, moment India transforms itself from just education to a knowledge economy, the per capita income will also increase from $1,000 to $3,000, which is quite true. And today, if you look at the India's per capita income, we have significantly improved post-independence. In the last 20 years, especially if you see, our per capita income has almost gone 3 times or 4 times more, and that is the reason why you see that India has been becoming one of the largest consumer base in terms of electronics, in terms of any FMCG products altogether. So somewhere down the lane, when you start reading the indicators of growth, you will try to understand and appreciate this factor that knowledge has been the key center for growth, and India has been constantly pursuing this dream of making our country a knowledge base, a knowledge hub for the future development and growth. With this, we come to the conclusion in terms of the indicators of growth, where we are also trying to understand in how the Indian economy has been making such transition, which is converting India into a well-functioning democracy. Thus, both the reports, when I say on a concluding note, both the reports point out the fact that using knowledge, using the ideology, both the World Bank report and Deutsche Bank report, using the knowledge, we can make India into an economy of higher growth, higher possibility altogether. With this, we come to the conclusion for today's session. I hope and believe that this session was interesting, informative, and educative. In the coming session, we will be trying to understand the further indicators of growth and the human capital formation theory. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened. Thank you once again for joining me today.